So once again, no surprise, the Israelis have bombed Syria. I've lost count. I've honestly lost count. And this time was slightly different. So they bombed Damascus airport, or in the vicinity of Damascus International Airport. And the Israelis killed, most reports said 3 soldiers were killed. I'm seeing new reports now that it's actually 5. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I can confirm that 3 have died, at least 3. Here's the headline from the Washington Post. Quote, Syria says Israel has carried out new attack near Damascus. Do you notice how they framed it? And it's not just them. Just look at any headline. Syria says 3 soldiers killed. Syria says da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So my point here, and again, this makes me very sad to say this. I feel really angry about this, but they have ruined Syria's name. They have dragged Syria's name through the dirt and the mud, and really insulted Syria. So to the point that they attached a negative connotation to the name of my country. So they don't want to tell you the truth. So they write Syria says. Right? Like, to sort of discredit it. Like, oh, it's the regime. It's Bashar al-Assad. Because they've made you believe, they've made the world believe that, Syria is basically one person called Bashar al-Assad. And he's evil and all sorts of bad things. And they've turned the name of the country of Syria into something like a negative connotation. And they don't want to tell you the truth, right? Even though it's clear Israel is the only one with the capabilities and the motives to do these strikes, and has admitted to them, right? We know that in the past, Israel has admitted to doing hundreds of strikes against Syria. They've taken advantage of the fact that there's a war and everything is in chaos, and the Syrian army cannot face the Israeli threat because it's dealing with Al-Qaeda, it's dealing with American occupation, it's dealing with Turkish occupation. There's so many things going on. There's sanctions. And so the Israelis take advantage of that. And this time they attacked Damascus International Airport. Can you believe this? I mean, this just makes me sad. It really makes me sad. Because I've flown in and out of this airport more times than I could possibly count. And it's really disgusting because for me, here's the airport. I love it. Really, just look at the Islamic at the architecture, right? I love it. It's really nice. And for me, when I think of the airport in Damascus, I think of my grandfather picking us up, or my uncle picking us up, and seeing my family again. Really, really great. And I mean, it's not only sad, but they're basically attacking civilian infrastructure, which of course is a war crime. And as a result, there was a fire. Okay, so explosions were heard in the Syrian capital Friday night. The Israeli attack resulted in a fire near Damascus International Airport, leading to the postponement of 2 flights. So already you can see that it's obviously having an effect on civilians. This could have easily gone wrong or intentional, who knows, and killed civilians, or done worse, right? Because they said a fire broke out because of this. And already they killed several soldiers. Like, who gives Israel the right to kill Syrian soldiers? Like, how is that okay? How is that acceptable? If Russia kills 3 Ukrainian soldiers, you have everybody whining about it and mourning them and this and that. Oh, the heroes, the defenders, and they act like Syrian soldiers. They're worth 2 pennies. It's disgusting. They dehumanize Syrians, dehumanize them, and it really makes me mad. It really angers me. And here they say there was no comment from Israel, which rarely confirms its activities inside Syria. It says it targets bases of Iran-allied militias, such as Lebanon's militant Hezbollah group, that has fighters deployed in Syria and is fighting on the side of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government forces, and arms shipments believed to be bound for the militias. So, again, pay attention. This attack against the airport was May 20th. May 13th, they also attacked Syria. They attacked in Hama countryside, killing 5 people on May 13th, so 1 week before. And again, there was several strikes, I think 3-4 strikes in the last 2 weeks. Who gave them permission to do this? Why is there no condemnation? Why isn't, Chuck Schumer railing about this? Or Anderson Cooper? Why don't they say one word? Just 1 minute. They can't even dedicate 1 minute to this story. It's too boring for you. It's acceptable for you. Disgusting. They're so brazen in their bias. And do you see how they try to manufacture consent in the Washington Post? They say that the reports of the attack came from state-run media. Like, oh, you shouldn't believe that. Like, take that with 50 kilos of salt, not a pinch of salt. Like, you shouldn't believe this. It's the state-run media. What do you mean? They just made up an airstrike? Like, what kind of madness is that? You call yourselves a paper of record, and you can't even say very clearly in one line, Israel bombed Syria, because that's a fact. And you can, of course, present what the Israeli side says or doesn't say. And you can, of course, present what the Syrian side says. But you have to look at the evidence. There was obviously a goddamn airstrike. But they don't tell you that. They say, it's Syria saying that. The regime is saying that. They manufacture consent for acts of war. If Syria bombed the Tel Aviv airport, oh my God, could you imagine the fucking reaction? There would be a war. There would be a war. But these fuckers can go and bomb Damascus International Airport, these colonizers, these invaders, these occupiers. Disgusting. They are so disgusting and immoral. And then they try to justify it with, Iran was bringing in weapons. They were smuggling weapons. Hold on. What do you mean smuggling? Smuggling is when you do something illegal. Like the United States smuggling 70 oil tankers out of Syria. Stolen oil, plundered oil. That is smuggling. That is theft. But when Iran is in Syria legally at the request of the Syrian government, when Hezbollah is there at the request of the Syrian government, when Russia is there at the request of the Syrian government, it's not smuggling. They're not doing anything shady. You, the media, are trying to portray it as shady. It's not shady. Is it shady for, the UK to send weapons to the Ukrainians? Is it shady for Germany to send fucking tanks to Ukraine? That's okay. What about if I call that smuggling? Oh, Germany's smuggling tanks to Ukraine. They're ridiculous. They're so ridiculous. They use this language on purpose to make acts of resistance, of legitimate resistance, sound like crimes. And they try to justify what Israel is doing, right? Like, oh, look, these guys were smuggling these weapons, these terrorists. So, it's not bad that Israel bombed them. First of all, there was no smuggling going on. Second of all, Israel bombed the Latakia port a few months ago, and all they bombed were a bunch of Nescafe 3-in-1s. Coffee, instant coffee, those small packets. You boil water and then you pour you put all the powder in the mug. Nescafe 3-in-1. I gotta say, I really love them, and it's really popular in Syria. We love Nescafe, but I'm not related. I'm not affiliated with them. But I'm just telling you how ridiculous they are. The Israelis. They just lie. They make up these ridiculous lies. Like, oh, they were bringing in weapon shipments. And so what I want to say is, even if it's true, it's none of your business. Syria is a sovereign country, okay, and Iran is a sovereign country, and they have a mutual beneficial agreement, right? They're helping each other. It's none of your business, right? You're totally fine with sending weapons to Ukraine, but Iran can't send weapons to Hezbollah or Syria. Now you get upset, you start airstrikes. Ridiculous. This is from the Jerusalem Post. They say, last month, 4 Syrian soldiers were killed in another alleged Israeli airstrike on Damascus. Alleged. Hold on a second. The airstrike was alleged, but they still died? How are they dead then? They fell off they fell off a building. They jumped out the window. They slipped on a banana peel, and what do you mean? The guys are dead. So obviously there was an airstrike. No, it's an alleged Israeli airstrike. Do you see how ridiculous they are? How childish they are? They commit acts of war, acts of aggression, and then say it's alleged. Vous êtes malade. This is unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. How, they call this journalism. Journalism. So that was on April 27th. So, really basically every week, every 2 weeks, Israel goes and bombs different places, killing Syrian soldiers, killing Syrian civilians, hitting arms shipments. Yeah, we don't even know if that's true, whether they're just using that as an excuse. And even if it were true, it's none of their business because Syria is allowed to do what it wants. This is Syrian soil. And I want to say one thing again. The map is very clear, right? The map is very clear. Israel is occupying Syria, not the other way around, okay? The blue down here, the Golan Heights, here, you see that? This blue area? This is Syrian soil. These are the Golan Heights. And Israel is illegally occupying the Golan Heights since 1967. The United States has said numerous times in Security Council resolutions that Israel has to get out. They don't abide by it. So, the Israelis want to draw their legitimacy from the UN. They say, we are recognized as a member state of the United Nations. We are a state. So, that part of the UN they like, but when the UN tells them to leave the land that they have stolen, all of a sudden, they close their ears. They don't want to listen. And let me be clear. Israel not only occupies the Golan Heights, it annexed it, literally annexed it. Like this is Israel now. Disgusting. And they did the same thing with Jerusalem. It's disgusting. They steal your land and then claim that they are the victim. The only person that can talk about defense is Syria. Syria is being illegally occupied, not Israel. Okay? So Israel saying, we are defending ourselves from Hezbollah. There are Iranian this and that in Syria. Yeah, of course. You know why? Because you're fucking occupying Syria. You are an aggressor. Of course Syria is going to go get help from Iran. Of course Syria is going to go get help from Hezbollah. You keep working with Al-Qaeda. You had the ex-chief of the Mossad, Israel's intelligence service, on Al Jazeera with Mehdi Hassan, admitting that Israel is helping Al-Qaeda soldiers. Fighters, I should say, right? He said straight up, Al-Qaeda. They have no problem with that. Why? Because Al-Qaeda was working against the Syrian government. That's the only condition that they wanted, right? That's all they needed. And they work with Al-Qaeda. Like, really, a bully, a cry bully. They attack, they punch, they bomb, they steal, and then they claim they're victims. It's just like with Shireen, with the journalists that they killed, right? If you criticize the Israelis for killing her, oh, you're anti-Semitic. What the hell is wrong with you? Every single situation, the Israelis manage to make themselves the victim. It's unbelievable. It's really, it's like an art form. It's an art form. They've mastered it. Israel is always right. Israel is infallible. Israel can do no wrong. Israel is perfect. Every single act that Israel does, every act of war, every act of terrorism, every act of theft, it's always justified. And if you say something, you're an anti-Semite. You're a Hezbollah terrorist. You're this and that, blah, 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 blah. But Israel can do no wrong. No, Israel is the victim. Remember, Israel always. This is, from what I'm seeing here, this is one of the soldiers that was killed in the Israeli airstrike, one of the officers. He died of his wounds after being injured. So this is Lieutenant Mustafa Al-Atma. By the way, I want to say something important, and Professor Marandi mentioned this earlier. The Israelis, they as I said, they attack Syria regularly, and sometimes they'll say that they killed, some guy from Hezbollah or some Iranian guy. And it's fake if the Iranians don't put the guys, the martyred soldiers' pictures on TV, right? Because here's the difference, man. The Israelis, this is not their land. They're not ready to fight for this because it's not their land. The Palestinian, the Palestinian will tell you, yes, I'm proud to be martyred, because they know what they're fighting for. This is their land. So to be killed, this is something that is honorable because they fought for their land. They fought against an occupier, an invader. Okay? They are doing something honorable. And when they're martyred, people revere them, right? Because they're warriors. Whatever word you want to use. My point is that always pay attention to what they say, the Israelis or the media in general. Iranian this and that was killed. Go check the Iranian media, because if someone was really killed, they would say the names and so on. They're not afraid of that. The Israelis, the media, all this, they want you to think that Iran is like doing something shady in Syria. There's nothing shady. This is very clear what's going on. They're helping Syria defend itself. End of story. There's nothing shady here. The only shady ones are the Israelis that come in the middle of the night to drop bombs. That's what's shady. All right, get that straight. So, man, really, I'm stunned. I am so stunned at the degree of this entire media apparatus, how much they lie every single day. What? Man, it's exhausting. I swear to God, it's overwhelming. It's unbelievable. They never stop. Every goddamn topic, they never stop. Just keep something in mind, what's happened in the last 2 weeks? We've seen Israel bomb Syria 3-4 times. They've killed civilians. They've killed soldiers. They even damaged and bombed the Damascus International Airport. Israel went and assassinated an Iranian colonel, IRGC colonel, in Tehran. Again, I'm speculating, but I got a good hunch it was Israel. And they killed a Palestinian journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, while she was on the job, while she was clearly marked press. And they killed a Palestinian boy before yesterday, was 17 years old. So, they attack Palestine, they attack Syria, they attack Iran, and claim that they are the victims. They are not victims. Israel is a fucking bully and attacks literally every single country in its vicinity, except those, of course, that have been pussy whipped, like, unfortunately, Jordan and Egypt. And again, I'm talking about the governments that have established ties with Israel. The people in Jordan, the people in Egypt are not like that and don't agree with this. They are completely against this crap, right? It's just that the U.S. has got Egypt by the balls with the aid that they give them. If Egypt suddenly cut ties with Israel, did something, the U.S. would cut the aid and then screw the whole population. So it's a very delicate situation. I understand. But my point is that Israel really just attacks everybody and then claims it's the victim. And if Palestinians did that to Israelis, if Iranians did that, if Syrians did that, they would scream bloody murder, right? And start a war over it. So double standard all the way.